Okay, Nigel, in part one we talked about the glory days, winning the Grand National and buying the Grand National winner. But what's your background originally? I mean, you from a horsey family?
Yeah, very much. Grandfather trained, always had a lot of horses. We always say the day that he died, he had over 70 horses around the farm at the time. Never was any blooming good, but that he loved them. He loved his horses. He loves the breeding. He loved the whole scenario. I think. I mean, obviously my father carried on from there. He was a successful amateur jockey, so it's basically always in the blood. Um, got to 16 as a kiddie. I used to go up to St Mark Prescott in the summer, which was a great for any young lad, was absolutely priceless. And when I turned 16, I should have stayed at school, but I wasn't bright enough to, most probably. But father put me in the car and took me out to Josh Gifford's, and that's where I started my career at Josh Gifford's.
And you're raised in Cornwall.
I raced in Cornwall, yes.
So
Yes.
it's a fair track to go anywhere to do a racing.
Yeah. Well, it was, because, obviously, just going on for that when I was a young lad. I loved my horses. I loved my ponies. Did an awful lot of pony racing at a very early stage. Tintagel on a Tuesday night and Boscastle on a Friday night right through the summer. Used to do a lot of midnight steeplechasing, which was quite an experience as well. But
Yeah, what's midnight steeplechasing?
it's frightening. Health and safety would be frightening nowadays. For the summer months, obviously, especially down in Cornwall with the tourists and everything like that, we used to race around the fields and jump hurdles and bales and things like that in the dark. And I was saying earlier on that there was a great night one day. I was coming to the last, and all these hurdles, obstacles were lit by tractor lights. But I think the diesel ran out on this tractor coming to the last hurdle, so the lights went out. And you can imagine the carnage after that. But it was great. It was lovely. I tried to be a member of the pony club, but they made it quite clear at early stage, because back then pony racing was frowned upon. They just didn't really want to know, which is a shame, because I used to love anything like that, but I loved my pony racing as well, and I'm sure it didn't do me any harm in the long term.
And tell us a story about the speech that the Pony Club chap made after you won the Grand National.
Yeah, I said earlier on, for winning the national, Lord Elliot and Liscard, it was a lovely thought actually. They sort of did a nice ceremony and presentation of me winning the national and everything like that. Was super. And the district commissioner started talking, telling them all what a wonderful member I was of the East Cornwall Hunt Pony Club and this and that. But they actually seemed to have forgot they actually kicked me out the Pony Club. But I kept very quiet and went along with it. But it just makes people change a little bit of success.
So your actual first job paid in a racing job was at Josh Gifford?
Josh Gifford. I mean, as I said before, obviously I spent a couple of summers with St Mark Prescott and things like that, learning the game. Went to Josh Gifford's. I was there for 2 or 3 years, something like that, and I'll bring his name into it, but got to be grateful to Paul in a lot of ways. Paul Nicholls had just moved to David Barron's as first jockey, and these are the days we used to have Broadheath and Play School and things like that, and he phoned me up. I had just started riding point to point, and he said, look, why don't you move closer to the home? There's a nice opportunity here, and I took it on, and so that's how I ended up at David Barron's. In the meantime, summer months when I was at Josh Gifford's, I spent a lot of time from St Mark Prescott's. I then went to Guy Harwood's in the Dance and Brave time. So my CV for the first 2 or 3 years was top class. St Mark Prescott, Josh Gifford and Guy Harwood. I think you wouldn't get too much better in the yards than that.
Now, I guess I can see the way your staff are treated around here. They've a perfect working environment, all very professional. I imagine back in your day, maybe it was a bit. I interviewed a guy, Roy Hartnell, who was a stable boy in the 50s, and he told me some horrific stories about initiation. Was that still going on when you were?
That was still going on there, but there's no point. You just accepted it, and as simple as that, and it'll come round the other way one day. I remember Eddie Buckley, he used to work for me when he's at Jim Bolger's. He had the right idea as well. Boys, come and get me, and just accept it. And then it became boring. But yeah, you're a young lad. It's all part of the fun.
So what did they do to you?
They did enough to me.
Right. So you got your start in national hunt racing at David Barron's yard. Who were the contemporaries there? Paul Nicholls was there.
At where?
At David Barron's.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I started at Josh's, to be fair, and Josh's the main, because at the time there was the Richard Rose, the Peter Doubles, the Paul Nicholls there. I think at the stage I started there, every lad in that yard had a license, so it just told you something about the standard of riding in that yard, and that, to be fair, is where I learnt the game properly. Obviously, when I went to David Barron's, it was myself and just Paul really, but where I really learnt the job was at Josh Gifford's.
And when you started working at racing yards, was it always your intention to become a jockey?
No intention at all. Most probably more to train than anything. As I said, I was quite light at the time. I've always loved my horses. But basically it was just leave home and just learn a bit about the game. It was never great to be any champion jockey or anything like that. And it just, how it all snowballed. I said I was an amateur jockey. I rode a winner point to point, but my biggest trouble point to pointing, I was so light. And to be fair to Paul again, he saw that opening. I went to David Barron's as an amateur jockey, but in about 2 months I turned a conditional, and it went on from there.
And was there anybody in particular that took you under their wing to sort of teach you the rudiments of sort of race riding?
Not really. I'll go back to Josh's. Because you were surrounded by so many good lads, and they were good lads, you just naturally learnt because there were so many good people around you.
And you actually rode your first winner for Kevin Bishop.
Well, yeah, I was going back to Paul, but I think the first year, just after I turned professional, I was supposed to ride a horse at Wincanton on boxing called Danny's Luck for David Barron's. I had actually been in the yard Christmas Day morning, everything's fine, and unfortunately I think the horse was lame in the afternoon. Now, to be fair to Paul, I didn't know it, but he knew it because he's in the yard at the time, and there was a spare ride on a horse called Red Grey Devil for Kevin Bishop, and he got me the ride on that. From that, my first ride winner was that day, and I end of that season being 2 lengths up in the county hurdle at the festival, and I'm sure I fell off it, although I think I fell off it, but it's the old story. I was in the right place at the right time, I had the right horse, and it just snowballed from there.
And when you first started out as a jockey, who were the big names in the weighing room, and sort of how was a young lad treated when you sort of turned up for the first time?
Yeah, obviously back in my time, there's Richard Rowe at Josh Gifford's. You had the Hill Davis, he just left Josh Gifford's. Obviously Peter Scudamore was champion jockey. There was a lot of gentlemen in the game there, and I was very lucky in that sense.
Right, so we've already heard about your winning the Grand National. What are the other highlights of your riding career, sort of in?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, my main horse was Seagram. We won some big races, but we said earlier on, for obviously winning the National, it was a great honour at the time to go to Russia and ride a winner in Russia and things like that. So, yeah, we won a lot of good races.
And so it was in Kiev, wasn't it, Ukraine, which was part of Russia, the Soviet Union at the time. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, funny, I didn't know that until obviously the war broke out last year, and I saw a picture of the race course. And I thought, hang on a sec, I got the same picture here. So it was so silly because obviously when I rode there, it was still part of communist Russia. So we didn't actually know where we were to be honest. But we were very young at the time, and I don't think we quite appreciate how lucky we were to be over there, and a wonderful experience. And the sort of race we won was like a Russian Pardubice, something like that, in middle August, rock hard ground, but fantastic weeks. I think, that, funny enough, that summer after I won the National, I rode winners in New Zealand, in Russia. I've been racing in Cyprus, I've been racing in Singapore. I have really done the tour, if you know what I mean, for one summer. And ended up at Newton Abbot on August the 1st.
Well, we'll talk about Newton Abbot in a bit. Right, now, I did read, this all been all good so far, but you received a 4-day ban for using your whip about 20 times on a horse called Colonel O'Kelly when winning at Wolverhampton. Was it the difference between winning and losing, or the rush of blood to the head that made you quite so whip happy on that one? I
never got rush of blood. No, it was. At the time, things were, we have gone a long time without winning at David Barron's. Horses were sick. Pressure. He was a lazy old tyke, lovely old horse, owned by Russell and Jill Peake. But he just needed urging all the time. And yes, if I didn't do that, I don't think we won the race. It wasn't right. And this day I've been banned for 6 years, but I won the race. You know, we can talk about the stick later on, but it shouldn't have happened, and I should have been banned for 6 months.
Right, we'll be talking about the stick now, if you like. So what is your opinion on the whip rule these days? The pro cush rule, as we'll call it.
Well,
It's not like the whip was in your day.
yeah, and I keep going back to Richard Pittman. What he's listened to the other day, he openly admits he would have won on crisp in the Grand National if he didn't let the horse halfway up the running at the elbow, because he unbalanced it. And I have said this for a long time. I'm not. It's open dispute, and a lot of people are going to dispute, and I know Roddy does a little bit, but for the image of racing, we're in the world we are now. Do we need to hit a horse behind the saddle? I've got a doubt. I think the whip's got to be carried. You carry it in the forehand position to correct the horse, but to hit a horse behind the saddle, I'm not sure about, because I think the image will look better. And surely, at the end of the day, then the strongest jockeys and the most genuine horses win the races. So I'll be shot down on it, but that's how my views are on the stick at the moment. And this is a man that hit 20 times in the race. But yes, I think it's the world we are now. We've got to put racing over as good as the sport it is, and that means reducing that use of the stick behind the saddle. I don't think it's a bad thing at all.
Okay, now your riding career came to a crashing end on the 26th of October 1993 at Newton Abbot when Beam Me Up Scotty fell at the first. I was probably there actually, but can you tell us about it?
I can't remember a lot. All I can actually remember, I was rode out for Nick and Jane Williams that morning. I can even remember to this day where I parked my car in a car park, but after that, can't remember for anything. About 6 months, I shouldn't think. Basically, what happened is, great jumper. The horse jumped the first Beam Me Up Scotty, jumped the hearse very well, and unfortunately, there was a horse a couple lengths in front of us, went about 5 strides and fell. Now, the trouble by that stage, we're in full gallop. Didn't see it coming, and he went straight over it, and unfortunately, the first thing that hit the ground was the head. So basically, if I remember right, I had bruising on not the outside, but the inside of the brain. It was very much the same sort of type of injury that Declan Murphy had that season. But Declan could be operated on. They could never operate on where my injury was. And it's well known, I didn't drive a car for 5 years because it was just going to take time, and it did take time.
And you were in a coma for a week.
Yeah.
So is there any lasting sort of legacy of that?
Well, when somebody says I owe them £5, I say I've got no memory, and that's about the only. To be fair, the memory has always been a problem, but you know, I look back and been very sensible about it. I was in a head injury ward, and I've always said to this day, I think I was the only person who walked out of the ward alive. So it tells you how lucky I was. So yeah, I can't complain too much.
And have you ever sat on a horse since?
Oh, too many times.
So how long do you think you'd have carried on riding had you not suffered that accident?
Well, to be fair, even things were starting to move then, because obviously I had actually fallen out with David Barons over Seagram. My family are farmers down in Cornwall. I had actually moved back to Cornwall and had a little yard in Cornwall. It was lovely actually. Our sort of first horse we broke in and trained, it won first time out, so we were certainly on the right wicket. And so I think it would only have been a question of time before I took up training seriously.